Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good now. My name is Ryan Erickson, and we are here together at BetaCodex Live on this fantastic Monday morning for me in Charlotte, North Carolina. With me today is my partner in virtue, not crime, Niels Pflaeging. We'll bring Niels on screen here. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for doing this with me for so long. This is our 12th edition already.
Yeah, this is the diamond dozen, right?
Yeah, cheaper by the dozen. That's
or not 12 angry men, 12 angry
12
episodes.
angry episodes. No, we want to have friendly episodes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And today here on BetaCodex Live, the topic of the past week and leading up to today is the trouble with cases, business cases, that they are offered from the sources of authority, Harvard Business Review, typically, into the world as this proof of knowledge and authority that a particular intervention will work, and to give safety in that. That to give comfort and safety in a coherent narrative in the past. So you want to come in there. So that's my first salvo. Yes,
Okay.
that the cases are about safety. And what's your response to that?
No, I just wanted to add to that. There's also the kind of cases that are lauded and applauded and hyped, and that supposedly carry the answer or represent the good tool, and that bring in the narrative of reliability, credibility, like the Spotify case, Spotify model, or Google uses OKRs, so OKRs must be good because Google is so successful, which is a total lie. That OKRs contribute to goodness and success and so on. So there's also cases like the Southwest Airlines case, the Toyota case, the Semco case, the W.A. Gore case, all these fabulous. So there's other cases that are promoted by Harvard Business Review and business schools, and the other cases, the success cases that everybody has to go by. You have to be like Netflix. You have to be like Apple. You have to be like, those are also, I think, cases we want to.
And of course, you in your business, in your environment, you happen to be experiencing the exact same problem in the exact same circumstances that this company was experiencing. So if you do exactly what they do in exactly this way, you will have the same exact results.
And the suggestion that we must emulate some other case, or that other cases prove something. And we want to discuss a little bit, not the individual cases so much, but how in our field of organizational development, etc., and agile and so on. Why the fuss? What do we want to achieve with this discussion about cases, right? Success cases and so on.
Exactly. So that comes into the topic of when you have been approached, and so an executive or a highly authorized individual is interested in solving a problem they have, and you or I or another practitioner comes into contact with them, and oftentimes in that conversation, very soon we'll say, okay, so you're talking in a good game that's decentralization, relative targets, that opening up space for invitation, so that it grants, not grant, but opens up the space for authority to emerge and all this kind of stuff. Well, that sounds really good, but can you tell me exactly where that's worked before?
Yes,
Where have you done this before? I'd like to see a case study of that.
Yes.
What's typically your response to that?
I just had this situation 1 week ago with a client. So one person at a client, I already work for them or with them as their consultant. And one, of course, I occasionally do workshops then for clients. And one of the participants of the workshop, he asked me kind of indirectly, has this really worked in our industry before? And this is a variation of the case question. Have you done this somewhere? Where have you done this? Does this exist in our industry already? Which is, interestingly, often comes combined with, we want to be innovative and progressive and the first. And then there is a question, where else have you done this? Which is, of course, contradictory, right? But I'm not inventing this. I have heard the combination of demands. We want to be the first in our industries, and where else in our industry have you done this? So let's not be first, which is, of course, it's like double bind.
It's
And so I
hypocritical
get
in
this
some way,
very
maybe.
recently,
Yeah.
and I get this every month, at least I get this once, and I have been doing this for 20 years. I would say that, I mean, I get a lot of this on social media, or I've gotten a lot of this on social media as well. Where has this worked? Where? Prove it to me, some kind of, or give me the story, of a case. So that indicates a lot of things. So I do not have one answer, but one of my answers is the counter question: why do you need me to prove it to you? If I give you an example, what would you then do with it? This is another classic, and I usually have a conversation whenever somebody gets at me with the case question. I start a serious conversation about this. There's not one answer that I kind of throw back, but I demand to have. Now we have to have a conversation. I sometimes tell this to my client. Now that you ask me this, we have to have a serious conversation about your motive of asking, because I cannot accept the question. In former times, and this to illustrate a little for our listeners, viewers, attendees here in this session, of course, I have the cases. By now, I even have, most of the times, I have cases from my own consulting experience, because I've been doing this for 20 years, right? But when I started 20 years ago, the great cases I had, like Handelsbanken, I mean, there were other cases that were minor, not so good, like Rhodia or Borealis. Now I think they are very minor or inferior cases in quality. But today, I make a point in not using cases to prove any point. Yeah. So if a client asks me about cases, I don't. Let's understand. First, I want to understand what you don't understand. Does it make sense? Right?
Yeah. Well, it is. Again, I go back to Covey occasionally, but seek first to understand. You want to understand what was actually happening, and whether the person who you're engaging with trusts you and trusts that you are listening, that you are paying attention to the problem and maybe the problem behind the problem, and be willing to sit with that and allow them to think through it, as opposed to saying, oh, you've got this problem. Oh, here's flip.
Spotify does it like this. Google does it like this. Netflix does it like this, right?
Yeah.
That's the cheap way out of the question. The laborious way. Yeah, Brian, sorry.
No, well, that's okay. But or even the hallmark cases of beta organizations, like you're saying, like the Toyota, like the Semco, like DM Drogerie Market. So that those cases that maybe they weren't built from the ground as beta organizations, because they that wasn't there in the world at that time. But these patterns of principles and interactions and decentralization that became the laws of BetaCodex and the intervention methods, that these folks they weren't looking to some magazine or some guide or someone to tell them what to do necessarily. So that's where I'm coming from. So that the hallmark examples, what are they really going to teach you? And are you looking for someone to teach you a lesson that you already know, or are you looking for some different way to approach the problem that you have?
Yes, I think I would. Beautiful how you just described this. I think you hinted at a very important point. One thing is I want to get convinced by cases, and the other is I want something. That's the opposite, and those things are mutually exclusive. You either want cases or you want something. So people who do not want something will want cases. So whenever somebody asks for a case, I'm not talking about the Harvard Business Review kind of case. And now I'm talking about the great examples of great companies, the Googles, the Apples, the whatever there is currently. What's the latest fad, Spotify model and so on. Yeah. So if somebody talks a lot about the cases or asks for cases, that means that person doesn't really want something. And this relates to what you just said. How did the great cases come about? The Toyota case, the Handelsbanken case, the Drogeriemarkt, Southwest Airlines, W.L. Gore. Those great cases that we also cherish, why did they happen? And if you look at those great cases, really the way they do things, it's interesting, but I think it's not really necessary to understand. So, well, the most interesting thing in my mind is how did the conviction come there? So, one of the founding stories of W.L. Gore is, regardless if it's a myth or true, I think it's true, but it could be a myth. Nevertheless, it's very important. The W.L. Gore case came from Bill Gore and Viv Gore, his wife, becoming convinced that while Bill Gore worked at Dow, the company would only function when it was in crisis. Otherwise, it was just bureaucratic, hierarchical. Nothing would happen. Nothing. No agility there. But when it was in deep crisis, when Dow was in deep crisis, and Bill Gore experienced this firsthand as an engineer and so on, they only then would the organization function. So they built W.L. Gore with this idea in mind that the company should always be in crisis mode. How to build that, and they came up with this non-hierarchical, non-planning, small units, highly entrepreneurial teams, no titles, no incentives, and so on. Yeah. So this is the crystallizing moment. Of course, in Toyota there was another crystallizing moment. The Drogeriemarkt, there's always a crystallizing moment, and I ask people back who approach me with a demand for cases, and in fact, it's a demand, right? I need a case to prove a point. But if you don't have the point in you, for example, I want to build a company that works, or I wanted to build a democratic company, that's Ricardo Semler, or I want to build a company that's based on really Christian values, AES in the United States. Dennis Becker, we mentioned that in the last episode. There might be different motives, yes? Or Toyota. We want to build a company that's capable of producing without us having much money or space or machinery to invest. And so on and so on. Right? So the crystallizing moment needs to be there. If you don't have a crystallizing moment, you ask for dumb cases, right? But cases can never prove anything to you if you do not have an insight first.
This idea of, now, again, there's some dispute about, some would say that this is the leadership, that this is the visionary leader that brings that inspiration forth. But there's a balance between, you gotta
hate that way of framing it, right? The visionary leader. No, we don't. I like to say, just to put the opposite. Sure. Of course, we can say, oh, Bill Gore and Viv Gore, they were visionary leaders, or Herb Kelleher of Southwest Airlines, a visionary leader. You could say that, but it's the cheap answer again. The good answer is business owners, entrepreneurs with a conviction, with a need, with a will to do better, to create a democratic, decentralized, humanistic organization, democratic or whatever you say specifically, right? But this willpower, it has nothing to do with charisma or cheap leadership. It's just you want the organization to change in that direction, to be that way. Yeah, and again, you do not see that very often, which is why cases are hyped. I think the hyping of cases. When I for the first time heard about the Spotify model, I thought, okay, this will end badly. Of course, the Spotify model, why did it become so successful? Because major consulting firms hyped the concept, the Spotify model, which is in fact something that the big consulting firms did before, this hierarchical layered thing, and now you call it subs, flips, dips, blips, and you can still invent the same bureaucratic thing. It's like, hierarchical. It's like strategic management with lipstick on.
Well, yeah, you're not changing how decisions are made.
That's why it's so successful. Exactly. You just rebaptize something hubs or subs or sips or
guilds,
sucks.
tribes, chapters, chapterly, and
nothing has to change. It's like matrix structures. It's really matrix structures rebaptized, right? And we have this. We have seen this coming up and up and up again and again with different names and treacherous brands attached. Yeah.
Well, and
again, it's the same. It's all the same, really. Mhm.
It's the underlying assumption that the way that an organization is structured with all-knowing visionary leaders at the top, and cascading strategy and goals and all that stuff, just cascading it down, the trickle down philosophy,
Yes.
and that is taken as table stakes. And right, we were talking in the pre-show about the Harvard Business Review case of oh, here's the challenge, here's the business problem that's being faced, and yada
Yes.
yada 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 yada.
Yes.
And how might Bill, the protagonist in this particular business case, what should Bill do
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
this model?
And the real answer would be he should do nothing because he's just a top manager and people doing the work should improve the system, right? So all these questions are treacherous. Then the other kind of case is what Gary Hamel did in 2006 or 9 or whatever, when he published this famous article, Let's Fire All the Managers, about the Morningstar case,
Yeah.
which became really world famous, right? Even I use it in the masterclass, right?
Yeah.
As you know. And on one side, the case is beautiful, right? It's a beautiful beta organization. So we cannot have anything against the case. On the other hand, the case glorifies top managers, I think, seriously. And then at the end of the article, Gary Hamel questions if this is doable elsewhere, which I find so diabolic, really. We discussed this in a masterclass, I think.
Yeah.
And of course, nobody learns anything from that case. And this is the real, for me, my top one. There, we could do a top 5 of reasons why. What's the trouble with cases? The top 5 reasons of trouble with cases. For me, the top one would probably be cases do not change a thing. Nobody ever did something differently because of the Morningstar case, or the Buurtzorg case, or the Toyota case, or the Semco case, which are all fantastic. These cases are fantastic. But the way they are presented, the way they are coined, the why of us asking about cases, it's all wrong. The conclusions we draw from cases to copy certain practices or tools, or because we are tool heads, we want to imitate the tools. So the top problem for me about cases is that they lead to zero learning, zero insight, really. Cases produce zero insight. There is this guy who promotes Toyota Kata and has been doing so for ages. Have you heard of him?
Yes, I have.
I think that has what he preaches and teaches has nothing to do with Toyota, and the people learn absolutely nothing from it, which is fascinating. The man is brilliant, I'm sure, the guy who's promoting the stuff, and Toyota is brilliant, but still the case is useless, or the methods that they spun off, Toyota in this case, it's utterly useless, clueless, really. Yeah, and nobody is to blame for that. It's just that the whole approach to it is wrong. You can only make my stance. Of course, we don't have to agree on this. You can only learn from Toyota if you already have the crucial insight. W. Edwards Deming always highlighted this. First, you need to have the willingness to produce a system that produces joy at work. Then Toyota can be a useful case to see how this can play out, what kind of practices you might have, what kind of principles you might apply. Yeah? I'm not saying that cases are useless, but you first have to have the insight, the conviction.
And yeah, well, it's this comes back to that crystallizing moment that I, as an individual with authority in the environment that I am, I either building something from scratch, which is one case, or I am here and I feel that I wish to inspire a change, and that I feel strongly about that. And this is, again, that's the transformation sponsor, right? The transformation sponsor has to have had a crystallizing moment.
Yes.
Or a
You
flash.
cannot carry him there or her there.
Right. And you said this too, you can't convince it. I'm not trying to convince you of anything. All right. So
you can. You might. I have worked with sponsors who became sponsors because, of course, I made them feel very bad about where they were. So some of our cases with open space beta, of course, like Thorsten Porat, his company in Hamburg. He had a queasy feeling about where he was with his company, and he had tried. I think he had tried OKRs and had seen that it's total disaster, total failure conceptually. So he had tried this and that improvement, and he had tried to create divisions and all this kind of stuff that doesn't work. So he had a queasy feeling. But of course, when we did the first workshop, he saw how his team reacted to the session. He got this insight that his system was in pain. His organization was in pain and troubled by command and control, and he himself had created that. So, of course, you might help other people to achieve that insight, or clarify it, or see it more clearly. Yeah, that we can do, but we cannot convince anybody. Never ever.
Well, but you had already been in conversation with Toro.
Yes, he wanted to have the conversation. He had a queasy feeling that this might be helpful, and he wanted to clarify. Yeah. Everything was there. Yes.
And so everything is there. The other piece that came to mind about why is this? So the two things that came. When challenged in public forums, I often get, I get the same thing. Where has this happened before? How is this working? And then you say, Buurtzorg.
That is like people saying "fuck you" in your face. And that's
I don't typically take offense. I try and
don't take it like that. But whenever I hear that, I think, oh my God, they're saying "fuck you" directly into my face. So I feel
you're full of shit. You are
exactly. You're full of shit. I shall not believe you. You might be just another fraud like everybody else, the holacracy people or something like that. They're accusing me of fraud indirectly. That's what I think when somebody asks me about a case. So, but of course, that's my problem. I think it's very interesting there's something to learn from science there, I think, right? For example, this very crucial insight that I got from Robin Fraser from the Beyond Budgeting Roundtable almost 20 years ago. And he said something like, and can I share this for a moment? The story of the Beyond Budgeting Roundtable was founded 25 years ago on the basis of trying to do case research. So we're talking about the trouble with cases, but I was involved when I joined the Beyond Budgeting Roundtable in 2003. I was involved also in doing more case research, right? Finding more cases. And then we figured out DM Drogeriemarkt, we only found it back then. I kind of figured it out. And Semco, I found it because I was living in Brazil. And so it was on my doorstep. But then one day, Robin Fraser took me aside and he said, Niels, here's the problem. Here's the trouble with cases. We don't need them anymore. When we found Handelsbank, we had everything we needed because one case, one possible, and this is very much like physics. One case would prove the law of physics. Yes, you only need one occasion where you can prove that it's true. And you only need one case that disproves your theory to prove that the theory is wrong. That's how. I'm not saying that the human sciences about which we are arguing about social systems, humanities. In humanities, not everything is like in physics, right? I'm not saying that it's the same. No. But one case like Toyota could prove beta, or can prove, or has proven beta. And that is one of my other preferred answers to anybody asking me about cases. I would say, look, I'm just saying that beta is better than alpha. You have an alpha organization. If you don't recognize that it's shit and that it's not working, that's your problem. And you have a problem with your own insight or recognition of taking things for granted, looking at reality. You're still not looking at the real problem. So the problem is not if beta doesn't work. If there's one beta case in the world, like Toyota, would be enough to prove it that is possible, right? Mm-hmm. But the real calamity is not to be in doubt about beta. The real problem is that it's so easy to prove that alpha cannot work and does not work. So easy. Everybody can see it everywhere. We could look at any alpha company and could easily prove how it sucks, how it doesn't work, how it's
the existence of the entire management consulting industry is proof that
so much proof, right? So much proof. Or that companies need this incentives and planning. And so all this in a way proves the point that systems are not working, or alpha organizations, command and control management are not working, right? And one case that would prove that the opposite, without budgeting, planning, command and control hierarchy and excessive hierarchy, without decentralization, so being decentralized, one case like Handelsbank would prove that it's possible, right? This is a very important insight. So the other question is, why are you asking me for more proof? I sometimes ask when it's a sponsor coming up with this thing about cases, I also like to ask back, look, why have you never really looked more closely at Toyota or Handelsbank or any of these cases? Have you? And then typically the answer is no. So I ask, okay, why? Why do you not give a shit about those cases that are often mentioned, that you could easily look at, where there's so much literature about, so much stuff. I sometimes like to. I personally got convinced of beta through the Nummy case as well. Do you know the Nummy case? That famous.
The using all they shut down the factory, kept all the workers the same.
General Motors factory,
flipped the system.
Yeah. Then they started a joint venture with Toyota, ran the factory together with Toyota. In fact, Toyota started to run the company for the joint venture, and they accomplished a turnaround within just a few months, and that became, of course, one of the most famous cases in the world. Right? That case alone could convince anybody of the power of beta and beta transformation and open space beta. Even if they did not do open space beta, they did something slightly different. Yeah, so why more cases? Yeah, why don't you look at what's there? Why does that not convince you? Because it cannot. What's missing? What insight are you missing? That's really a question that the case question raises.
And this does the question that's asked. I was presented with an acronym, WDGLL. I'm like, what are you talking about? WDGLL. What does good look like? Oh, okay.
Oh, that's nice.
All right. Well, it depends on your problem. If your problem is that your budgets are always screwed up, all the time you spend on budgeting and you're still not getting the results you want, well, what good looks like would be Handelsbanken in this case. You think about that would be the case you'd look at. And that, again, that's what came back to me. So why do I want a case? Because I want to know maybe this is, again, I'm making a leap in terms of what's inside someone else's head, but what does it look like? What does a beta organization look like? Why should I believe you?
Yes. Yeah, that's a great question. Another question is, why do you need the safety of the case, of the case myth or the case? Because a case is only a claim. Look, tomorrow Toyota could turn sour and turn into another Ford or Volkswagen.
Well, Numi did.
Yeah, I think it was closed down.
Yeah,
crazy things happen. Exactly, crazy things happen. I mean, in the real world out there, democracies turn into authoritarian regimes. Yesterday, today it could have happened with Spain. So, or with Israel, it could happen today, right? So, these things happen. These tipping points or transformations exist from alpha to beta and from beta to alpha. They can both exist. But it's important to understand, I think, that the transformation away from command and control requires conviction. The transformation to command and control, the transformation from decentralized, self-organized, democratic to a command and control organization only requires sloppiness, lack of care, lack of energy, lack of
hygiene,
lack of organizational hygiene, so to speak. Yes, it is beautiful, right? So to a beta organization, you only get through stellar conviction. You must be very firm. At least one person is enough. That is why I like to use this movie in some of my teaching. I like to use this movie 12 Angry Men with Henry Fonda. And in that movie, one person is enough to turn the whole room around, right?
Yeah.
The whole room full of jurors in a murder case, who are convinced by sloppiness, really, by sloppy thinking and prejudice, pride and prejudice and anger, to judge the accused guilty of murder,
The
right? And
murder.
one
Yeah.
person, number 8, is enough to turn the room around and
Yeah.
crystallize the doubt in everybody.
This was a huge learn. I had never seen the movie before, and then I watched it as part of the master class. I'm like, oh wow, that really flipped my head around. And it was the Henry Fonda character who's
Yes.
the linchpin of all this.
Yes.
And he wasn't like he was convinced of innocence, and
Yes.
so he started with this point that I just want to hear. I want to hear everything. I want to. I'm not ready to put this person to death without
He's in
a
doubt.
real. He's
He's
in
in
doubt, and to dig into that process and to stand up for that. And that had to be, how much crap did he get in everyone was, and then the one gentleman who's the most egregiously prejudiced in that was in his face. He was like, oh, you did that, and he was
hatred.
and still there.
By the way, that's
Yeah.
what we get in beta transformation as well. I think usually there is amount of despair and hatred in every alpha organization. I think that's why I think alpha organizations exist as alpha organizations. That's why alpha command and control is sustained, because there's so much distrust, hatred, prejudice, looking down on others, such a little tolerance for diversity. Those are drivers of alpha command and control and management. Yes, all this hierarchy, it doesn't come from, and this is an important thing that we do not see in cases, and that a case cannot prove to you. Even the greatest case like Southwest Airlines and so cannot prove to you. By the way, I enjoyed the book about the Southwest Airlines case. It's called Nuts. Not sure if you have read it, Ryan. It's beautiful, and it's very.
I remember the napkin story, but
yeah. This is the nuts. It's called Nuts because of the nuts that they give out. Gave out at Southwest Airlines flights, and it's also called Nuts because the company is so nuts. Yeah, but the stellar conviction of Herb Kelleher was that, and of course then of Colleen Barrett as well, the successor as CEO, that people want to take responsibility. This human theory why human nature assumption is the starting point of it all. If you do not have that, if the sponsor doesn't have that, you cannot inspire that fully in a person. It needs to be there at some point, or there needs to be this spark of conviction. Only then can you create a beta organization, because it requires this willpower to drive out the hatred, to drive out the prejudice, to drive out the despise for other people, and the lack of
contempt.
The contempt. Yes.
Contempt.
Thank you. The lack of contempt.
The other
lack of love, as they would say at Southwest Airlines.
And this is we're kind of going off the mention of leadership as love. It was kind of a really awful, it was a meaningless statement, in that leadership is love.
Yeah.
And because those are two so rich words, but the idea of, well, in this case, what does love mean in the organization, and what does it mean to show love and compassion for the people who belong to this large group of people who are in it for a common purpose, right?
Yes.
And to define that, what it means, is important. So
yes, and the consequence of that love, that respect, is that you can demand things of people, which is it's not an infantilizing kind of love, like how you love your little children. It's the kind of love that leads to, oh, I love that person, I respect that person truly, so I can expect something. I can challenge. I do not have to look down on the person. We can deal on an eye-to-eye level, and it's okay to assume that that person wants and can do extraordinary things, and I just have to create, or we together have to create the conditions for that to happen. To
And
emerge.
this is and this is kind of the wider idea of cases. Well,
Cases
if
do
this
not
whole
teach you.
how did theory X and theory Y come about? So when did how did Douglas McGregor come up with this? Right, and were people asking McGregor about how, that what is in the nature? What do you believe about human nature? And well, if we want to have a case, for example, well, it, look around you and the people that believe in others to do good work without coercion and to believe in the I'll call it like the sacred power of the human spirit to do good work in the world. You know, I don't. You if you want to find it, you will find it, and if you have that conviction with that you will. In terms of that emotional bit, so
Yes.
maybe a little bit off.
Cases cannot convince you of theory Y. Cases can, so you must believe in theory Y, in the intrinsic motivation first, to then see the reality of alpha and beta organization. I think by the way, you asked an interesting question. How did Douglas McGregor get to that insight? I do not remember quite. We should look back at his book, The Human Side of Enterprise. It's probably there. I do not remember pretty much, but of course there's probably the underlying truth that, and the same goes for Frederick Herzberg, Abraham Maslow, the other great motivational scientist, or Viktor Frankl from Austria.
Well, but the thing
Psychologists, psychotherapists, and motivational researchers of the 50s and 60s, they had this insight about theory Y already, and then they kind of tested it in research.
Well, they had the conviction. They had a conviction to go. This is I want to find out about this, and I am going to leap out, and I am going to create experiments that have never been created before to test whether this theory makes sense. And that's but there wasn't again, you have to have a reason to write the fucking book. You know, and
Yes,
that's
or
the
to do
point.
the research. Herzberg did a lot of actual scientific research on motivation. Yeah.
And again, so I don't know the history of Handelsbanken, so I have to claim ignorance on
In
that.
Handelsbanken, Jan Wallender, that story I know quite well. And Jan Wallender, he had this adamant conviction that people were motivated and so on, and he tried this as a smaller bank first, and then moved to Handelsbank and became CEO, because there at this previous bank, Sundsvallbanken, I think, a smaller bank, regional bank in Sweden at the time, but this was in the 1960s. He had tried out decentralization on a smaller scale, and at Handelsbanken with the when he went to Handelsbanken as a CEO, he let's say he consciously demanded the right to restructure the organization, to decentralize, or to have a blanco check, so to speak, on how to change the organization. He got it because Handelsbanken was in such deep crisis at the time, 1970. So we know where this conviction by Jan Wallender. But then, of course, Jan Wallender, he was an economist, and he backed this up with economic reasoning. And of course, economic models also have their set of human nature assumptions. Every theory in economics also has assumptions about human nature, right? And I think Jan Wallender was very conscious about this aspect. Probably in his autobiography somewhere, there's an answer to that. Yeah. Highly recommended book in English. Decentralization, I think, is the main title. Published by a little Swedish publisher. Yeah. But cases,
what more?
Again,
Yeah.
they
What more?
answer the wrong question, right? And at the wrong time, I also think. There is this beautiful insight that if you're, and that's maybe by Taiichi Ono, I'm not sure where I got this from, but you should only visit a great company if you already understand the philosophy and the principles beforehand. Otherwise, we will not even be able to see anything there. I know plenty of people who have visited Toyota factories and haven't seen anything there, or who visited Dell factories when they were best in the 1990s and didn't see anything, didn't learn anything.
They came with their own idea of what they were looking for based on their own assumptions.
Yeah, I when I started consulting, I had this colleague in Germany, and she had just visited a Dell factory, and she said it just looked like an ordinary production site to me. And I said, "What? You didn't see anything about the self-organization, and that they don't have inventory and they didn't have any inventory, of course." No, didn't see it. That's like the horrible thing of cases. They do not teach you the actual thing. Of course, you could talk for days about the great cases, but what do people learn? They take away nonsense stuff like kata or a tool here and there, or OKRs, which is the worst, right? The worst that Google ever did was OKRs, and that has become a fad. It's a sad story. What insecurity, and ultimately we're talking about insecurity, leads us to do. I think
that the safety, the desire to be safe, the desire to be right, the desire to I don't want to go out on a limb and try this goofy experiment because I might get fired. And I'm afraid. Well,
and this is the thing. Alpha is goofy, and this is our problem, of course, in the BetaCodex movement. If we want to, or anybody who wants to approach true agility, true lean, true beta, and so on, true quality, in the Deming sense, it's the starting point for me is to assume and to understand that the alternative we are looking for, or that organizations should strive for, is not goofy. Goofy is to stick with command and control. It's goofy to be a fascist. It's not goofy to be a Democrat. It's goofy to be a fascist or an authoritarian thinker. It's a Trumpist. It's very goofy to be a Trumpist. Very, very, very despicable, really. But yeah.
What I've got here.
The normal thing is to fight for freedom. The normal thing is to be more like Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln. That's why I love these movies. Lincoln, did you see it? The Spielberg movie?
I haven't. Sadly, I haven't seen it.
Or Selma. Look these movies. Watch these movies. They are so great.
Hidden Figures was one I had heard about too. So now we're on media. I want to get. We have a couple folks who I think maybe want to talk to us on Zoom in a moment.
Yeah.
You mentioned a song when we were talking about this topic. I think when you came up with the title, Bruce Cockburn, isn't it?
Bruce Cockburn, The Trouble with Normal.
The Trouble
Did you listen to it?
I did. So what is the trouble with normal?
It's the trouble with normal is it always gets worse.
Exactly. The
trouble normal is alpha. That translates so well to our.
The trouble with alpha
is it always gets worse. Yeah, listen to this song by Bruce Cockburn, 1980s, I think, at the beginning of the 1980s. It's a little hit of Bruce Cockburn. Wonderful song, and an album as well. The Trouble with Normal.
And great bass playing on that album as well. I appreciate that.
Yes.
All right. Well, let's cool down here for a moment. Any parting words before we give our invitation to betacodex.org/live to everyone?
Yeah. Cases won't save the world. Thinking does, right? That's my final word on this. What's yours? Not so final words, of course.
The not so final words, I think, are: don't be afraid to make the music you were born to make. You're never going to be the Beatles. You'll only ever be a bad Beatles cover band.
Nice.
So, all righty. Well, I'll see you on the other side. And thank you to everyone who has been watching now live in the moment here. And for those of you who may be seeing this in the future, I hope you are enjoying your now. And thank you for the precious gift of your time and attention. Be well. See you next week.